Yeah, I'm Benedict Ejelono, a data scientist and an analyst. So today I'll be taking us on, how to communicate data insights to stakeholders through storytelling. And yeah, let's jump right into it. So data storytelling basically is the ability to effectively communicate insights from a data set, right? So then after you've gotten your data sets, you want to create a narrative. Now that narrative is the whole story part of the whole thing you're trying to explain or the problem you're trying to solve. And there's no data story without visualizations, right? Pick out three of these things. We pick out data, we pick out narrative, and then we pick out visualizations. Those are three key important elements to an effective data storytelling. Pick out three of them. So first, it bridges the gap, right? So if you're working for a company, a startup, you have people we call the technical and non-technical stakeholders, right? So technical stakeholders are basically members of your team. If you work on a data team, you possibly work with a tech team, right? Those are more technically inclined people. They might not entirely get the integrity of what it is you're trying to explain, but they have an idea of technical terms you would use. And then you can have people in, say, operations or finance, right? People that are not entirely in the tech niche as yourself. Those are your non-technical stakeholders, right? So you want to be able to create this connection between the technical and non-technical stakeholders in your company or wherever it is you work, right? At the end of the day, you want to help everyone understand how to make decisions based on data. There's a famous quote in the data analytics space. It said, any decision made without backings from data is just an opinion, right? So when your opinion is or your decision is fact checked with data, then it becomes an actual business decision, right? What other reason would we want data storytelling to matter? So we have a very complex problem, business problem we're trying to solve, and we're doing investigations, right? And we do the analysis, you do all that, right? It wouldn't really tell well on you that you did all that amount of hard work, you cleaned your data, you tested different hypotheses, and at the end of the day, you've got some actionable conclusions, but you can't effectively communicate it to your stakeholders. That's a waste of time, because at the end of the day, you would just be explaining and explaining, no evidence, right? That's how we say it. So you wouldn't want that for yourself as an analyst. So that's what this masterclass basically is going to help you learn how to do, and that is how to actually bring data to life, right? And at the end of the day, once you've brought data to life, once you've modeled a story that you want to give to your stakeholders or whoever it is you're presenting your findings to, then they can now take actions, right? You've given them a direction to follow. Stakeholders would basically then be able to tell, okay, based off the findings that you presented this very day, we decide to take this particular course of action. So you're basically a storyteller for your company. You're basically an advisor. You're basically so many things because you have the power to uncover insights and relate it. So if you're a data analyst here or you're a budding data analyst, you're actually a superhero in terms of what you do for an organization, and I think you should be proud of yourself. Yeah. So if you know me personally, you know I'm a sucker for memes. Yes, I can't do without inserting memes in my daily workload. I'm probably a meme lord at this point. So you can see here, this is what you basically would look like if you're trying to explain your findings to stakeholders before attending this masterclass, right? You will be explaining and there's no evidence, right? And let me show you something else. Now, this is what you will look like after attending this masterclass, right? You would you look very professional. You maintain steez, or how did they say it? I see some people clapping. Okay, your steez will be at 100%. You won't be like this guy. This guy is coming. This guy is just, he's all over the place. But you'll be very organized. You maintain your steez and you drive home the point. So how to get started with data storytelling? But you have to understand that if you want to start, your journey of data storytelling, first off, you have to define your objectives and your audience. The way you would present a data story to C-level executives is probably not the same way you would tell stories to. When I say C-level exec, that means if you want to present to your CEO, your CTO, chief operation officer, and the rest, the way you would tailor the story to them, it's not the same way you tailor the story to probably someone in the marketing team or in the operation team and all that, right? So your first step is to define who your audience is going to be and what exactly it is you want to get out of that story. The next thing is to develop data literacy. So I worked under a particular head of data. You probably, let me not mention names, but he's a very popular head of data at LinkedIn. I worked under him, and one of the key things, or one of his key KPIs for every quarter is try to educate the organization he works for and increase their data literacy. Now, it's one thing that you are trying to tell an active data story or actually drive insights to your company, and it's another thing that there's a divide, right? That they don't entirely know how to follow up on, what it is you are teaching. So subsequently, if data storytelling is something you want to make an active case for in the organization you work for, you have to bring out time to at least train your employees, right? Or train certain key members. It could be unit heads, it could be business heads, teach them about data, teach everyone how to a very large extent, interpret and analyze data. Now, this step equips stakeholders with the necessary skills to engage with data and contribute to the data storing process. Right? So why is this important? You wouldn't want a situation where you are explaining your whole data findings and you are the only one that is, and you are the only one that is understanding what is happening. You wouldn't want that situation, right? So you want everyone to be at a minimum knowledge gap with what it is you're presenting and what it is you're actually trying to, pass across to them. So one of the reasons is you foster collaboration. I've had situations in the past where we are trying to solve a particular business problem, and the data we need to actually investigate the problem might be sitting down with someone in the operations team, but because you are not, you've not created that environment for collaboration, right? You don't know that you're supposed to even meet someone in the operations team. Now you might think all your data is on the cloud or something, then only for you to now find out that there's someone in the operations team that's still working from Excel. It's a very frustrating process, trust me, and you wouldn't want to be caught in that kind of situation. So foster collaboration if you want to do active data storytelling. And then finally, you use the right tools, right? In data storytelling, you invest in data visualization and storytelling tools. It's very critical and very important. So you choose tools that are easy to use and scalable for your organization needs. I wouldn't want to dwell on this because we're still going to visit visualization. So how do you craft a compelling data narrative? Now, this is where things get, and I would want us to pay very key attention to this. If you want to create a data story, you have certain elements that you want to infuse in your story. Right now, if you remember, if we go back to the beginning, remember I said the three key elements are data, narrative, and visualizations. I want to assume everyone on this call understands what data is to a very large extent. So I'll be dwelling more on the narrative and the visualizations part of things. So let's get down to the narrative. If you want to establish a very strong narrative, we have different storytelling frameworks, right? But this is the most popular. I would share with you some other storytelling frameworks, but this is the most popular. And you try to set your characters, you try to set your setting or your setup, then your conflict and resolution. So to help illustrate this, let us use this particular instance. So we try to be as practical as possible. Now here we said, imagine you're a data analyst and you discover that your company's recent sales declined due to customers aged between 14 to 23 of all genders, influenced by a viral social media post. Now, let me explain what's going on here. As a data analyst, you've done your investigation and you found out that your company's sales for this particular period of time declined, right? It fell. And then by the time you started doing your investigation, you found out that your customers aged between 14 to 23, let's call them the Gen Zs, right? Let's say the Gen Zs, they stopped patronizing your company. You found out that they stopped patronizing your company. And that's why there was a decline in sales. But during your investigation process, you got to find out that it was as a result of a particular social media post that your marketing team made. And in that particular social media post that they made, right, they made an advertisement about an environmentally hazardous way of producing their goods, right? And we know how these Gen Zs are. If you're a Gen Z here, please, I'm not dragging you. I'm just trying to make a case here, right? But we know how Gen Zs are these days, right? We have quite a number of sensitive Gen Zs, very proactive sets of generation. We have to give it to them. Right? You have to give it to them, but they are very much in touch with their feelings these days. So you can't just be very insensitive around the Gen Zs this period. So, and they make a great percentage of customer base these days. So in one of your marketing campaigns, you kind of offended these Gen Zs and then they stopped buying. And then you found out that it was because your marketing team made a particular advertisement, and in that particular advertisement, they showed a way they were making part of their products, and probably it was releasing too much smoke into the environment. And the Gen Zs were obsessed with it, like, okay, we are trying to reduce global warming, and this particular company, we are going to cancel them. I think that's the language they use, right? Any small thing, they've canceled people, and they've canceled businesses these days, right? So how do you tell a data story from this using the character setting, conflict, and resolution framework? Now, the first thing you do is you get who your characters are, identify the key players, right? So at the back of your mind, the key players are the customers, which are aged 14 to 23. And then the other key players are your marketing team, your internal team. Now, you don't necessarily need to relate this to anyone. This is personal to you because this would help you set the tone for the kind of story you want to tell, right? So your characters, you have to know who are the people involved in the story you're about to tell. That forms your character. Now we move on to the setting. Now, in your data presentation, right, in your data storytelling, you explain the situation, right? And what is the situation? You can start off with, there has been a recent drop in sales driven by customers of all genders, aged 14 to 23. Now, this is where visualization also comes into play. You use a data visualization to illustrate the decline. I'm still going to show us a demonstration, but I'm just trying to set the tone so we understand where this is going. So first, the characters involved, and then you're trying to set up your plot, right? Now, you tell the problem, and then you can illustrate with data to show, okay, in the last few months, we've had a decline in sales, And when we did our analysis, we found out that 14 people aged 14 to 23 stopped patronizing us, and coincidentally, they were a very big portion of our customer base, right? So fine, you've set up the whole setting necessary to tell your data story. So what is conflict? Conflict is where you now start describing the root issue. Now you explain to stakeholders that we made a viral social media post, and in that particular post, right, there was a negative environmental impact. There was a negative environmental impact that we portrayed in that particular post, and it kind of offended a lot of our customer base, right? And you can also this is basically we are trying to let stakeholders understand that this was an actual problem and this is what caused the problem. So first off, you explain the situation to them. Don't forget that in case you jot in this, although I mentioned that this slide we made available to everyone. You explain the situation at first. Now you describe the root issue or the root cause. What caused this particular problem that we're trying to solve, right? This is what caused it. And whatever it is you do, you try to convince stakeholders at this point that your analysis is sure and spot on. You can include research to show that the growing consumer focus on sustainability, that the growing customer base that you guys are having, they are more concerned about how you create your products than how you just sell it to them, right? So basically, at this stage, anything you can do to convince stakeholders that the points you are trying to drive across to them is a very critical one, so they pay attention to you. Now, the next thing and the final step is resolution. Now, it wouldn't make sense that you just, presented, a problem statement to them, right? It doesn't make sense to just tell them, okay, this is the problem. Because we have a lot of that now in Nigeria. We have people that would, if you sit them down from now till tomorrow, they will tell you what the problem is in Nigeria, but they can't offer a reasonable solution. You don't want to be that kind of analyst, right? So after you are done telling them what the problem is, you propose a solution, right? And then you can start off with, based on the data, you can suggest that, that particular social media post that caused the problem, now you try to backtrack it, right? What I mean is, in that particular social media post, you guys showed a way of producing your products that's not environmentally sustainable. Now you tell your marketing team to create another social media post that shows that you guys are now using environmentally sustainable processes to create your products, right? Now, once you do that, you try to make that post go as viral as possible, right? And then you can also back it with data visualizations to show that if this line of action is taken, then over the next few months, you visualize that, or you estimate that this is what the potential yield on our revenue would be, right? We are still going to, visit other different storytelling frameworks. But the first thing, don't forget, the first thing you do is, start off with the characters, know who are the key players in your story, try to explain the situation of things, try to then describe the root issue or the root cause of the problem. Then afterwards, you propose a solution, right? Now, sometimes your story might lack a conflict. Your story might lack a conflict, right? In such a way that there might be no actual problem that you are trying to solve. For example, it's not always the time that your company made a mistake, right? It might be that they are doing something right and you want to show them they should also continue. In that case, you don't need to include this particular stage. You can move on to explain the situation of things and then also explaining to them why they should continue doing those things as your solution, and also tell them that, okay, you know what, the team is doing something right and you think they should continue with it. Let me not dwell too much on this. Let's move on. So we have different storytelling frameworks. The example I just gave to you is called the 3-act structure. Now, the 3-act structure, remember I just explained that to you. You have the setup, you have the conflicts, and you have the resolution. So basically, the example I just explained to you is called the 3-act structure. Like I mentioned, the slide we made available, and then you can also, read this in depth. Another storytelling framework is the pyramid principle. Now, this one is usually used for, when you're talking with, let's say, C-level executives, CEOs, COOs, right? Most of those guys, they don't have time. They want you to hit them with the key facts, key, metrics that you have to present, right? C-level executives are very busy people, so you don't have time to start dilly-dallying, giving them stories and all that. Go straight to the point, right? So with the pyramid principle, right, you start with the answer, right? There's a problem. We found out that, let's use a particular use case, right? There's a problem in the company. We found out that our employees are not staying more than 6 months. What is the problem? And then you are consulted. You've done your data analysis. You've done all your gymnastics behind the scenes. Management wants to know, what is the solution? Now you begin to tell them it's as a result of you enforced that they shouldn't be working remotely and they should all be coming to the office. And most of them stay really far locations and all that stuff, right? So you start with the answer to the problem. Now, because they are C-level executives, after telling them your answer to the problem, you can't just stop there. You have to provide supporting arguments, right? Now, if you say that the reason why your employees are not staying for more than 6 months is as a result of they don't have a solid work-life balance as a result of the working condition that you guys implemented, now you have to support this particular answer. Now you bring out the facts, right? You can show them that, let's say in 2023, employees that were made to work from home or work a hybrid, in a hybrid work environment actually stayed for over a year or a year and 6 months or 18 months or thereabouts. But when you're looking at the data for those that were made to forcefully work on site, those are the people that were not staying up to 6 months, right? You can also provide visualizations to show and help your, assert this particular answer you are given. And then you can add additional details, right? There's nothing, take it from me, there's nothing a C-level executive likes than, being actually convinced. Now, those guys might be hard-headed. I hope there's no C-level executive. Oh shit, my boss is on this call. So basically, co-founders, CEOs, and the rest, they're very difficult people. But in as much as they're difficult, they need you to convince them enough to show that you know what you're talking about, right? Oh, someone is giving me thumbs up. Seems like you've seen Shege in the house of C-level executives. But yes, they're very smart and experienced individuals. So if you are going to be giving them an answer, you have to be very, very assertive of your reason. Now, you give them your source, you give them your analysis methods, you give them your assumptions, your limitations, and all that, right? Every single thing that supports your findings, you make sure you give it to them. Now, that's the pyramid principle. Let us not forget what we're talking about. You start with the answer. After the answer, you provide supporting arguments. Then after that, you add additional details that would make what you're presenting sound very convincing. That's the pyramid principle. And then the last one we'll look at is the STAR method, right? Now, the STAR method is an acronym. It stands for situation, task, action, and results, right? Now, this is a very structured storytelling framework. Personally, I prefer using the 3-act method and the pyramid principle, because most times I use the 3-act method when I'm interfacing people from other departments and units and general stakeholders. But when I'm interfacing C-level executives, external investors, I use the pyramid principle. Now, the STAR method is something you can also explore. I'll be leaving these slides for you. Now, there's a whole lot of data visualization tools, right? Some of you might have come across Power BI, Tableau, IBM Watson. I know I've used Power BI, I've used Tableau, I've used IBM Watson, I've used D3.js, I've not used QLake, right? But at the end of the day, the fundamentals are very, very important. So before I even go down to this, there's a visualization tool that wasn't kept here, and I think it's very, very important, and that's Excel, right? Something we do at Campus is, we focus on the fundamentals. It's very important, right? I always tell my mentees, and I always tell, people that I ever come to interface in their data analytics journey, it's very good that you start with Excel, right? Most of the dashboard tools that are going to come across, Power BI, you come across Tableau and all that, they have their underpinnings to Excel. Don't skip the basics, right? At Campus, part of the curriculums we have here, the starting point for most data analysts learning at Campus is usually Excel. Then from there, they move up the ranks, right? Because every data manipulation you do, every visualization you do, right? Let me show you a fancy visualization so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Now, look at these different visualizations you've seen here. Can you tell which one was probably done by Power BI, or which one was probably done by Tableau, or D3JS, or IBM Watson, or Streamlit, or any of that? You can't. Because the truth is, at the end of the day, if you are very good at these visualization softwares, at their end result is usually very similar. And you'll be very surprised if I tell you that this level of data visualization can actually be achieved by using simple Excel. But most people are not patient enough to actually know that, right? Excel is a very powerful software. You can do data manipulation with it. You can do data cleaning with it. You can do data visualization, build robust dashboards with Excel, right? But I'm not here to advertise Excel. I'm just here to, also preach the need to actually know your fundamentals, right? I can assure you here, if you are a budding data analyst, you spend time with Excel to a very large extent, learning other visualization softwares will not be a problem to you, right? So we have visualization tools here. You can see they are really pretty and looking. And at the end of the day, you can't tell which is which, because at the end of the day, if you know how to use your visualization tools properly, nobody can really tell which tool to use in creating it, so long as it's a very good one. So we'll be looking at what makes visualizations very compelling, because like I mentioned, if you remember the 3 elements of data storytelling, you have your data, you have your narrative, right? I just explained some, the ways to set up your narratives, and now we're looking at visualizations. So I'm going to show you 2 dashboards, right? But before I even show you 2 dashboards, I want to show you two dashboards, right? Now look at this dashboard here, and look at this dashboard here. So this is dashboard 1, and this is dashboard 2. If I was to ask you which of these dashboards do you think, is quite straightforward and easy to understand, if you can drop your answer, look at the dashboard 1, look at dashboard 2. Which would you say is a more presentable dashboard to give to stakeholders? Dashboard 1 or dashboard 2? Okay. Is someone saying dashboard 2?
Web traffic.
All right, the web traffic, right? So if I may ask, who answered that particular question? Dashboard. Someone said dashboard 2. Okay. All right. So if I may ask why you think dashboard 1 is, a more suitable dashboard to present, You might tell me that it's well structured, right? It's not like too many things are happening at once at the same time, right? It's well arranged, it's simple to look at, there's not too many color riots happening and all that, right? And if that's part of your reason, I will tell you that yes, you are right. The web traffic, I mean, oh, okay. Because I saw someone say dashboard too. I was like, all right. So this is basically I call this the CSRA. If you can keep this in mind, then you can make really, really effective data visualizations. Now, you don't need to do different stunts, right? So we're already teaching data analytics here on the side, right? If you're trying to create a data visualization, let it be very clear. Make your visuals easy to understand. Let it be simple. Avoid doing too much, right? Avoid all this. That is not necessary. Some people think infusing too many colors in their dashboards is a very good direction. It's not. Trust me. Most times, I can give you a free tip, right? This is free knowledge here. If you're trying to create a dashboard, most times start off with a light background. Most of those dashboards on black background or red background, they're not easy on the eyes to see. Start off with a white background, and depending on the company's color or the organization color, try to fuse in their colors with a white background. It's very easy and soft on the eye to look at. Use relevant visuals. For example, if you look at this, they just used a card, a horizontal bar chart, histogram, and then line charts. Simple and straight to the point. They don't need to put in percentage, images all in one. It doesn't drive home any points. It makes it overwhelming to behold. And then at the end of the day, the A stands for aesthetics, right? Now, aesthetics can be subjective, but I think in the general scheme of things, everyone can agree that a visually appealing design is a visually appealing design, right? There's something like beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder in terms of data dashboards. Everyone agreed that this is a more presentable dashboard as opposed to this. This is just all over the place, right? So this is a terrible dashboard. Too many colors are flying around. It's easily distracting. Look at how this is synchronous, a simple color, white background, bright, and you can easily follow it up, right? So this is an effective data visualization means. And like I mentioned, I'm a certified mean lord, right? You wouldn't want a situation where your stakeholders are trying to keep up with your visualizations and their eyes are all over the place, right? You are explaining your visuals and they are looking at all directions, trying to focus on what you are doing. Please don't confuse your stakeholders, please. They don't have time. So yeah, this is one meme I had to attach to drive home this point, right? So yes, we get to the very key part, the very final part, right? Where we try to identify key elements of a compelling data story. And I'm rounding up on this, right? I'll release this slide after now. But if there's anything you take home after today, is that when you're trying to tell a data story, start off with your data, establish a narrative, and then back that narrative with visualizations. Like I mentioned to you, when I'm presenting to internal stakeholders, most times I like using the 3-act method, where I put on a setup, I put on a conflict, and then a resolution, right? So in the setup, you introduce the context, what the problem is, or what exactly it is you're trying to solve, and then the next step is you present what caused the problem, right? And what you think the challenge, what resulted in that particular challenge, what caused it, and then at the end of the day, you profile a solution. Simple 3-act setup, right? That's a 3-act framework. It's my go-to framework for data storytelling. So you remember, a data story with a narrative arc always deserves a visualization. So let us set up something. Let's set up something, right? Now we have a problem here. Now you don't have to always go all out to create really advanced looking dashboards, right? If you have very key indicative visualizations to support or drive home a point, it's enough. You don't need to do any mental gymnastics or start overdoing things. Now we have a problem here, right? Now the company is saying that their productivity dropped. They're looking back. A particular company is trying to find out why their productivity dropped. So we have a problem where a particular company, they are complaining that their productivity dropped in Q2 as opposed to Q1, and then they are trying to find out how to resolve it, right? Now you started doing your analysis and you found out that in the same quarter where the productivity of the employees dropped, right, the remote hours increased. So in Q1, the remote work hours was at its lowest, and that was when they had the highest productivity. But as soon as the company, increased the remote work hours, that is, their employees stopped coming to the office, the productivity of the employees dropped. Now you have very key indicative visualizations to support your story. You can start here. You don't need to go all out. You don't need to do anything fancy. Now let us see how we can use the 3-act scenario to explain this, right? Now you start here, understand your context and characters, right? Now you can start off by explaining that the company experienced stable productivity in Q1 with high customer satisfaction. Look at the visualization here. You point out to them during your data storytelling that in Q1, the productivity was at its peak, but the remote work hours was at its lowest, which means when the employees were coming to the office, right, their productivity were high, as well as the customer satisfaction, right? You've set the context, that's your setup, right? Now you have to introduce what the problem could be, what's led to that drop in productivity. Now you tell them that in Q2 there was a sharp decline in productivity that correlated with an increase in remote work hours. Are you seeing how we are laying this storytelling, not just by word of mouth, but by making reference to visualizations? So in Q2, we had a decline in productivity, and it correlated with an increase in remote work hours. So when we increase the number of hours that employees were to work from home, their productivity dropped and the customer satisfaction dropped. You've set up the conflict, you set up your problem. Now, what is the resolution you want to give to this? Now, you tell them to implement flexible working hours to accommodate remote work challenges, right? What do I mean? Although some people here might not like it, personally, I'm a fan of working remotely, but then time and data has shown that most companies don't actually benefit from the remote work culture, right? So you communicate to management that they should try to balance the number of hours they allow the employees to work from home, as opposed to, just letting them work fully remotely. Because you've shown them, your data has shown that the more the employees are working from home without coming to the office to work, right, their productivity is dropping. Then you can also investigate, why is their productivity dropping? Is it that in their individual houses, they don't actually have enough tools and facilities to work? That could be a potential cause for the decline in productivity. But as opposed to when they're in the office, they have tools to actually help facilitate their work. That might be a potential problem or a solution, right? So you start off with the problem statement, that's the context. You start off with the conflict, explaining what the problem is, and at the end of the day, profile a solution. This is the 3-act storytelling framework. Like I mentioned, we'll release this slide for you to catch up on and also read. But always remember, if there's anything we take out from today's session, when trying to create a compelling data story, always carry out the setup, identify what the problem is, or what exactly it is you're trying to tell the story around. Then point out what the problem is. While you are doing all this, don't just be saying it for word of mouth. Introduce visualizations to back yourself up, and then profile a solution. This is my go-to method for storytelling, and it works beautifully, right? At the end of this, we've been able to look at the importance of storytelling. We were able to breeze through that. We're able to look how to tailor your stories to different audiences. I mentioned that if you're going to be presenting to, internal stakeholders from different teams, the way you craft your story is different from how you craft your story for C-level executives or external investors, right? So at the end of the day, we looked at different storytelling frameworks and visualization tools, right? Like I also mentioned, don't be heavily focused on your visualization tools. If you are good enough, you can really achieve a lot by using, different tools for same purposes, right? At the end of the day, they still give amazing visualization outputs. And then we look at the key elements of a compelling data story. If there's nothing you gained out of this masterclass, know that to tell a very good data story, you start with your data, cleaned and actionable data, and then you set up a narrative. That's the whole story. But there's no insightful story without visualizations to back it up. So you have your data, you have your narrative, and then you have your visualizations. So what are my final thoughts? At the end of the day, your goal is to transform data into a story that resonates with your audience. Always know your audience before dishing out a data storytelling journey, right? Always combine clear visuals. Don't just, if you keep on telling, let me go vernacular. I hope yes. Okay, I think we have foreign people that joined. You will continue to explain. You will shalaye. I'm not Yoruba, but I'm trying to try from that. You will keep on explaining and explaining. But the moment you back your data story with visualizations, right? It's a very key component. So if you are here, try to also beef up the kind of visualizations you set up, right? And also infuse the human elements in your data storytelling. So I made this sound very professional, but sometimes if you're trying to really convince hard-headed internal stakeholders, you can bring in the human element, right? You can start off by being emotional. Can you imagine that in the last 3 months, we've not been able to make up to 1 billion naira sales as opposed to last year? This is quite worrisome. I had to go into the data we have from the organization, and during my investigation, I got to realize that this is the problem and this is how we've been suffering as a company. Now I'm here to offer a solution. Do you see how you can infuse emotions to actually make people sit up and listen to your data story? So, but don't forget, the 3 key elements is start off with your data, create a narrative, and then back up your narrative with what? Visualizations. If you need to be, a little bit emotional to drive home your point, feel free. But please, if you are going to be presenting to C-level executives, don't be emotional, please. Those guys are very impatient. They have no time for that. Go straight to the point, use the pyramid principle, and drive home your points to them. So, yep, at this point, I'll be concluding. And Judith, over to you. We'll probably facilitate the Q&A session. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Benedict.
My question, I just want to understand something. The statement, the title said data storytelling. So I want to just confirm.
the data storytelling is more or less how to do your verbal presentation, not necessarily how to write. I want to just confirm that.
All right. Okay, so that's a very good question. So most times when it comes to data storytelling as, an everyday aspect of an analyst's work life, most times it will be verbal, right? There'll be situations where you need to create a report. That's a different, that's a different dimension to things. But the data storytelling, the context which we established here is the verbal, visual type of storytelling. So yes, the written storytelling is usually in form of a report, and that takes a different dimension to what was discussed here. But when it comes to data storytelling, most times, like we mentioned, it's always going to be verbal and a visual session, like what an actual presentation is. So I don't know if that answered the question, Nadine.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right.
But my question goes on the tools for. Is there any difference between them?
Okay, if I get your question correctly, you're asking if there's a difference between the different visualization tools, right?
Exactly.
All right. So, having worked with a number of visualization tools, I can tell you that the key differences between them most times is their user interface, right? It's just like you are using an Android device, right? So the way an Android device feels, the way a Nokia would feel to you, if you can mute yourself, Louis, please. So the way a Techno would feel to you, and the way, let's say, an Infinix device will feel to you, and the way a Google Pixel will feel to you, and the way a Samsung will feel to you would be different. But at the end of the day, they are all Android devices. You can make calls with it. You can download games from the Play Store with it, right? Just different user interface and experience. But that's why I mentioned to you, if your foundation is very solid, the end goal is usually going to be the same, right? So for example, you might be trying to create a visual in, let's say, Power BI. The place where you need to go and get your visuals from might be on the right. But for Tableau, it might be on the left, right? For Amazon Quick Sites, it might be that you have to go to a different section entirely to get your visuals. But if you've mastered the foundation and basic, the end goal is always going to be the same, to create insightful data visualizations with them. So
okay,
no,
if I'm to get your explanation clear, what you're trying to say is the tools that you are more compatible with, the user is more compatible with. That's what you're trying to say. The tools are the same, just the one you are compatible with. That's what you're trying to say.
Yes, but at the end of the day, that would be a misleading thing for me to just answer. It's not what you are compatible with, it's what your organization is compatible with. Your job as an analyst is to be able to use any tool you find yourself in, and that's why we are preaching the foundation is important. If you are working at Access Bank today, and Access Bank is using Power BI, the moment they employ you, you can't say because you've been using Tableau before you joined Access Bank, then Access Bank has to change to Tableau. You have to be flexible enough to be able to use any visualization tool you come across, provided you know the foundation. The end goal is the same. Do you get what I'm trying to say now, Lewis?
Okay.
Yeah, so be very flexible enough to be able to use any visualization software, because at the end of the day, it's the same end goal you are trying to.
In what aspect of data analysis is Python most useful?
Okay, so personally, as a sucker for Python, I really love Python, I have to admit. So Python is very fast in terms of, in terms of trying to spin up database solutions. Now, what do I mean? With Python, I think I was in a competition sometime last year. Some of you might have come across this competition, Data Fest Africa, where my team and I think it was last 2 years, not last year, sorry. When my team and I, the first edition, my team and I came first position, right? I was a data scientist on my team, and we have a data analyst. And then he said something. He said he hasn't seen anyone write Python code as fast as I was writing on the day of the competition. And that's because I'm very comfortable with Python as a tool. Now, with Python, you can do basically a lot of, the data, life cycle projects. You can clean data with Python, and data cleaning is an integral part of data analysis. Personally, for me, it's faster for me to clean data in Python as opposed to, importing my data in Power BI or Excel to clean it. Python is a faster tool for me to clean data, right? With Python too, sometimes you also need to connect to a database, right? As an analyst, most times you need to retrieve the data yourself. So you need to be able to go into a database, get the data you want to work on for your analysis. Python can also help you do that with its libraries. Using Scikit-G, SQL, Alchemy, and some other packages in Python, you can actually connect to a database, retrieve data into your Python script, and in that your same Python script, you can start cleaning the data and even export the data as a CSV or as an Excel format, right? So Python is a very robust tool for data analysis, but don't get caught up in the hype. I know a senior business intelligence analyst. I think he has over 8, 9, 10 years experience, and he just started learning Python. So he was able to grow to the point of being a senior analyst without knowing Python all through the years. Python is a very strong tool. Yes, I can admit that the industry is, really warming up to Python, but there are other tools that can also, help you go fast as an analyst, as opposed to just focusing on Python. Tools like SQL, tools like Excel, and then a visualization tool. As a matter of fact, if you want to climb up the ladder, this is a different topic. I'm sorry to digress, but just an advice to people on this call. If you want to climb up the data analytics ladder, be very, very proficient in SQL and the visualization software, and all of that things will fall into place. I hope I answered that question, Rama.
For the three method tool, for the star method tool, is it a correlation of both 3-act structure and pyramid structure?
All right. So that's a good question, and that's the reason why I came back to this particular slide, so you would see that in the grand scheme of things, that's the reason why I didn't want to heavily focus on what's it called, the star method, because if you start breaking down the star method, you'll see that it's in a way resembling the 3-act method, right? So in the 3-act method, you do your setup, you do your conflicts, then you do your the resolution, right? But if you look at the star method, you have to start with the situation and task, which is kind of similar to setting up your the setting in the 3-act method. Now I talk about your action, but in as much as you are trying to, in the next step in the 3-act method, talk about the problem statement. That's why you now focus on the problem and what caused the issue. But in the star method, you start looking at the steps and processes you took to complete the project. Now, this I didn't focus on the star method because personally I don't employ it, right? And here you are trying to show more of your workings, right, than actually driving home the key narratives that you intend to do during your presentation. So in the next step, your action, you are trying to explain the steps. All this is just in a bid to convince stakeholders that the data story you are giving to them is actually a trustworthy one. Now you start telling them about the techniques you employed. If you had a reason to do a Monte Carlo simulation, if you had a reason to do a hypothesis testing, what was your confidence interval, what was your p-value and all that, right? You start telling them this during your action phase. And at the end of the day, at the end of all this analysis and hypothesis testing and all that we did, this was the result we found out at the end of the day, right? So I won't entirely say it's a blend of the 3-act and the pyramid scheme, but this has a particular context to which it's, it applies to. That's the star method, right? So most times people that use the star method are statistical analysts, right? Statistical analysts in the sense that they are mainly trying to convince a more technical audience as to how they got their results, as opposed to actually trying to cater to technical and non-technical audiences. That's why I focused on the pyramid and the 3-act structure. I don't know if that answers the question, Kingsley.